Now to a climb down by the president of Colombia that sends a clear message from Donald Trump's White House of the way it intends to carry out its business. The crisis after Colombia's president refused to accept 2 US military aircraft with repatriated Colombians on board, as he said they should be returned, as he put it, with dignity on civilian planes. Now, Trump responded then by saying he would immediately impose tariffs of 25% on Colombia, and that would soon become 50%. Colombia's president then apparently backing down. Well, let's discuss the latest with our international affairs editor, Kethevane Gorjestani. Kethevane, I mean, it's an extraordinary story, this kind of tit for tat, really, isn't it, between the two presidents? Tell us more about what happened.
And over X. There was a sort of X war between the two presidents. Took place over a few hours, as you said, and it started, and that is what the White House is pointing to, which is that the Colombian president, Gustavo Petro, had actually, or at least Colombia itself, had actually authorized those planes to take off, and then he changed his mind and refused those planes as they were midair. That is what the Americans are saying, and that is what created the sort of tit for tat. And you talked about the tariffs that Donald Trump said he was going to slap on Colombia, but there were also other forms of sort of sanctions. There were visa restrictions on officials and their families, suspension of visa processing in Bogota, as well as enhanced customs inspections of Colombian goods coming into the United States. And Petro himself, for a short time, said, well, if you're going to slap tariffs, I'm going to slap tariffs. And so it sort of all escalated very quickly, and then very quickly de-escalated when Petro finally gave in and the White House lifted or put on hold the tariff order, because they said that they were going to wait to see if those planes actually landed and that everything was in order, if you will. Some of the other moves also sort of paused, but waiting to see whether Colombia will accept those flights. The Colombian president also said that he was going to make the presidential plane available for some of these deportation, because one of the arguments of the Colombians is not so much the deportation, but the way it was done, especially through those military planes. One explanation of why Petro backed down quickly with the thought of these tariffs, you have to look at Colombia's economy when it relates to the United States. Colombia is a huge supplier of crude oil, of fresh-cut flowers, of coffee. The U.S. market is basically a third of Colombian exports, and so you see why a 25% or even a 50% tariff on Colombian goods would have been dramatic for the Colombians, and that is in part why he decided to back down, it seems.
Broadening out a little bit, I mean, potentially a bit of a test case here, I suppose. I mean, how are other countries reacting, really, to these deportation flights?
Well, not everyone is taking such a confrontational line against Donald Trump in the United States. We were talking on Friday. These were the first publicized flights of deportation by the White House press secretary posting those 2 pictures of men in shackles being loaded onto military planes. Those were 2 flights that carried 80 migrants each that were destined to Guatemala. Guatemala accepting those flights, didn't make a fuss, sort of business as usual, if you will. Mexico took a little bit of a balanced approach last week. Reportedly, they refused a military plane, but they accepted 3 of the commercial charter flights that ICE, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, usually uses for those deportation flights. Brazil accepted the flights, also commercial flights, but did criticize the United States and the Trump administration for the way in which those migrants were treated, sort of like the Colombians, saying that, yes, those people need to return to their homes, but that can be done in a humane way. And finally, you have Honduras, one Friday, also accepted 2 flights, but the president of Honduras has called an urgent meeting of South American states to sort of figure out how to deal with this situation with Donald Trump. That meeting will be taking place. It's actually Latin America and the Caribbean states, because it's not just South America that's involved, and that meeting will be taking place on Thursday.
So deportation flights, nothing new. I mean, we've just heard about a whole series of them. So why is it suddenly an issue now?
Well, there are two things that make it different. And to give a little bit of context, I want to look back at some of the numbers under the Biden administration. Just for Colombia, for example, there were 124 deportation flights from the U.S. To Colombia back in 2024. As a whole, deportation flights from the U.S. to about 150 countries around the world, 640 between June and October 2024 alone. So as you said, absolutely nothing new. What is new is A, the use of military planes, and B, the way that the Trump administration is making a show of it, posting pictures of people in shackles. And so I think the mix of these two, and we saw some of the leaders in South America saying that they didn't want to see military planes and accepting the charter flights, not accepting the military flights. So that maybe has something to do with it. But of course, the Trump administration is trying to make a show of their crackdown on immigration. And the press secretary, Carolyn Levitt, said today's events, talking about yesterday, make clear to the world that America is respected again. So it is about making a statement. So far, the numbers are in line with what has happened in the past under Democratic and Republican presidents. But it was something that the Trump administration wanted to really crack down on, immigration. They know it works with the American public, and they've made it a show, and they've even have this slogan, promises made, promises kept, and this is how they're showing that they're keeping their promises.
Kethevane, thanks very much. Kethevane Gorjestani, international affairs editor there.